reason why I picked the topic tonight, 5 tips for your retirement, is because we've just come through a pretty horrific period in American financial history. Not the worst, actually. When I got out of college in 1983, anybody trying to get a job in 1983? Anybody remember that period at all? That was actually worse than now, but people just don't remember. And realistically speaking, nobody remembers what it was like during the Depression because nobody was, more than a baby back then. So a lot of people, my own clients, of course, are worried about whether they could ever retire at all. I mean, anyone have that feeling? Yeah. Show of hands. Yeah. Who feels like they could never retire at all?
No, I know for a fact.
And well, there you go. That would be expensive.
Thank you.
So I'm not going to give you 50 tips on how to handle your retirement, because that would be a graduate school seminar. But what I would like to do is just give you 5 things to start thinking about. And the first thing is your house. A lot of people say, hey, I don't need to save for retirement because when the time comes, I'm going to just sell my house and I'm all done. And that might have worked, from let's say 1995 to 2005, right? Everyone could see that working pretty successfully. But I don't think it's going to work for the next 10 years. Anybody disagree with me on that? I mean, we got some real estate brokers here. I think they're thinking, level would be a good thing at this point. Tom, what do you think? But there's another factor. When you get to about 65, your ability to move somewhere else and flourish in a new environment drops off dramatically. I see this in my own clients. And so I tell people, look, if you're going to sell your house and move, do it before you turn 65, because thereafter it's going to be far more stress than you can imagine. So if you're going to think about retirement, think about your house as a house, not necessarily the pot of gold that's going to pay for it. So then the next question is, well, if I can't count on my house, what about Social Security? All right, let's talk about Social Security for a couple seconds. If it is still there, which for people of my age, 48, is a big question mark, right? Your maximum benefit, assuming that you paid in the maximum amount over time, is about $3,000 a month. And that's if you start withdrawing it at age 65. You actually have some choice. You can start withdrawing it as early as 62 or as late as 70. Well, why wouldn't you want to withdraw it at age 62? Because at age 62, you get a 25% reduction off that $3,000. If you wait until you're 70 to start taking out Social Security, you actually get 30% more. So I have a very serious conversation with my clients as they get towards Social Security. I say, hey, how old were your parents when they died? And if the answer is 50, then I say, we'll start taking it out at 62. But more likely, the answer is 80 or 90 or 96, right? I just happened to see a poster of David Glidden's father, 96, something like that, at the fish store earlier today. On that basis, you want to postpone paying Social Security until age 70, get that maximum benefit for as long as possible. So that's a conversation that has to come into play. There's another thing that people aren't aware of about Social Security. When Social Security was first created, primarily husbands were the breadwinners and wives were the homemakers. And the Social Security payout was based on husband's income, and if he died before the wife, then she got his income, and that was really not material to her lifestyle. In the modern world, both the husband and the wife are making incomes, both are paying into Social Security, but when one spouse dies, the survivor only gets the larger of the 2 income streams. So if you have both paid into Social Security the maximum amount in your whole lives, and you're getting $3,000 apiece, and one of you dies first, the survivor only gets half. So that has to sort of factor into your planning a little bit. And again, could affect that 62 versus 70 calculation. All right, so if the maximum benefit you can expect from Social Security is $36,000 a year, reasonably speaking, I don't think anybody in this room is going to get by on $36,000 a year. So you have to have other resources, other assets. And the single biggest question mark, the single biggest doubt for anybody facing retirement is, do I have enough? And here's how you find out if you have enough. You can, reasonably speaking, draw out between $4,000 and 6% a year from your assets for the rest of your life and never run out of money. Okay? Now you say, but Dave, the stock market made 0% over the last 10 years. That is true. But bonds did very well over the last 10 years. And a retired person's portfolio is roughly 60% stocks, 40% bonds for exactly that reason. Sometimes stocks do well, sometimes bonds do well. You mix the two together, you end up with an income stream that you can live on. 4% to 6%, those are very low numbers. Where do they come from? Well, we have 100 years of stock market data, bond market data, money market data, and inflation data. We do simulations or whatever, and academics have done this for us, whatever. And I used to say that 7% was the upper limit of a conservative draw rate. But in the current environment of 0% return on money markets and 2% return on bonds, I say, whoa, 6% is the upper bound for the time being. So let's say that your family gets by on $90,000 a year right now. I'm just picking a number to make it round in my own head. And you're getting $30,000 a year from Social Security. Well, that leaves $60,000 that has to be covered by other resources. So if you have $1 million in your investment portfolio and you're drawing it at 6% a year, there's your $60,000 plus your $30,000, it covers your $90,000, you're all done. That's the aggressive draw rate. If you actually had $1.3 million, you could draw that at 4%, and that's still your $60,000. So, fine, right? All you need to do is get $1 million, right? Just, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but how close do people feel to like $1 million right now? Exactly. Okay? So, is there any hope? Can you ever retire at all? Right? With all the divorces. Almost everybody in this room has a business of some kind. And one of the things that you should be thinking about is, 5 to 10 years from now, I might want to sell this business. How could I achieve the maximum value out of my business? I'm the president of my company. My business goes up for sale in exactly 20 years. All right? Everything I do today is to maximize the value of that company 20 years from now. And so there was a gentleman who owns a flower shop here, Flowers on Chestnut.
Yes, right here.
Mark. Okay. Yeah. So Mark, one day, will have the decision about what to do with his. I'm sorry, Michael will have the decision about what to do with his business. Sell it to an employee, sell it to an outsider, right? Maybe he owns the building. Maybe the building is worth more than the business. All right. I studied with great interest the sale of Marine Home Center 2 years ago because the price was unbelievable for a small retail operation in a distant island, until I read the small print and realized that the purchase price was based not on the current value of the income stream of Marine Home Center, but on the fact that 5 years from now they're moving that entire business to where Nantucket lumber used to be and redeveloping all that land as waterfront properties. So that's one aspect. You've got a business to sell. Other issues that come into play. Maybe you have an older parent who eventually passes away, and then their property gets sold, and you get some cash that way. Maybe you get a lucky break in the stock market. Options. A lot of my clients in New York, their wealth is based on participating in stock option programs. But there's one other way that everybody can get to that $1 million, which is to make regular monthly investments into some sort of savings program. Okay? And that would be a 401k if you work for a medium-sized or a large-sized company, or it would be any number of different IRA accounts if you work for a small company or you're self-employed. And I tell my clients, look, if you start in $500 a month or $200 a month or $100 a month, and you just do it every single month, regardless of what the stock market does, regardless of what the bond market does, regardless of what the terrorists do, regardless of any number of external events, then eventually you'll get to that $1 million. Anybody familiar with the rule of 72? Okay, rule of 72, rule of thumb. If you take your rate of return, divide it into 72, that's how long it takes your money to double. So if you have a 10% return and you divide it into 72, your money doubles every 7.2 years. I tell my clients, reasonably speaking, the stock market will grow 8% a year for the next decade, which means reasonably speaking, your money should double every 9 years. 8 divided by 72 is 9. But if you have not got a program in place, if you're not making regular investments, you'll never get there at all. And so I say to people, procrastination is the enemy of your retirement. If you don't make decisions now, for 10 years from now, 20 years from now, if you just push it aside, postpone it, push it off for another day, you'll never get there. And so let me just make sure I'm doing enough time. Okay. So, circling back to my firm, how do I help you get to that sort of promised land? Well, because we understand stocks, and we understand bonds, and we understand insurance, and we understand a lot of things that go on. And we spend 8 hours a day studying it, and I have 30 years experience investing, right? And I tell people that they are no more likely to invest successfully in the stock market on their own as an amateur than they are likely to go to Las Vegas and be professional poker players. I mean, if you watch the TV, if you watch Jim Cramer on CNBC, if you get Money Magazine, any number of publications will convince you that, hey, if you just do a little bit of research, you can do this on your own. And the answer is, no, you can't. No more than I could walk into your job and be an accountant at Marine Home Center, or no more than I could walk into, what's your job?
Innkeeper.
Innkeeper. No more than I could walk into her job and be a successful innkeeper, right? I could try, right? But how many gazillions of factors go into being a successful innkeeper? Okay? So, how do people establish a relationship with my firm? Well, first off, everybody who gave me a business card tonight will get placed on my newsletter, which comes out once a month. It's written by me. It's very serious. It's very sober. It's not flashy CNBC stuff. It's what really you need to know and also need to avoid to actually get to your investment goals. Number one. Number two, we put out pieces periodically on estate planning, on income tax law, right? How many people are aware of what the tax code is going to be like next year? Anybody have any idea what their tax rate is going to be next year? Actually, he does not. The answer was, my CPA does. And the correct answer is, nobody knows. The current tax laws expire in another couple of weeks, and nobody has any idea what the tax code will be next year. Nobody has any idea what the state laws will be next year. Right? Nobody knows that if you died this year, theoretically tax-free, right? Because this was the year was the 0 year, whether your state can be taxed retroactively. Okay? So we spend a lot of time studying those issues and keeping our clients abreast of it pretty much in real time so that they're making the best of the situation. Everybody who gave me a business card will get a newsletter. And then after a couple of months, I may follow up with you and say, hey, do you have some questions as a result of being on my newsletter or from seeing my presentation? If people want to talk to me more quickly than that because they have some urgency, we can totally accommodate that. We have about a 5-page questionnaire that we ask people to fill out. And once upon a time, that questionnaire asks things like, what is your risk tolerance? And we don't ask that question anymore. Because we realized that it's our job to tell our clients what their risk tolerance is. So we ask them about their age, we ask them about their dependents, we ask them about their resources, we ask them about, oh my gosh, you have a handicapped child we need to keep in mind, right? Because we got to set up a trust for that child, right? If you're not around anymore. We look at, how much people are spending on real estate, right? I mean, I had to tell one family, look, you bought that second home, but you can't afford it. So how are we going to address that issue? And out of that process, which is actually more akin to building a house. How many people have ever gone through the process of building a house or doing a big renovation? A third in the room, it looks like. Okay. If at that first meeting, if you said to the architect, I want to build on a second floor, and the architect immediately rolled out blueprints and said, we'll start tomorrow, you would fire him. Because he hasn't asked you any questions. He hasn't asked you what's the use of that second floor. Is it for family? Is it for a master bedroom? Is it for guests? Is it for your art studio? Right? In Nantucket, you're pretty restricted in what you can do. But if it was Greenwich, Connecticut, is it a villa? Is it a Normandy? Is it a Tudor? Is it a 3-car garage, 5-car garage? You want the architect to spend a lot of time asking you questions and having you think and come back maybe a couple days later or a couple weeks later with some thoughtful answers before he designed a house for you. And we go through the same process when we bring on a new client family. We spend anywhere from a month to 6 months asking them questions, making them look up stuff for us. You'd be surprised how many people with, let's say $5 million in assets have no idea where the money is. They just don't know. And you say, well, you told me you had $1 million, but I only have $500,000 in it. Oh yeah, well there's some other bank account. I got to figure out where that is. And so a lot of what we do is bringing all of the assets into a single custodian and streamlining things a little bit. I took on a client family a couple years ago. They only had one question: how much can we spend per month? And I said, I don't know. How much do you have? They go, we don't know. I said, really? He said, yeah, we have no idea. All right, fine. Bring me a shoebox with all your statements and I'll take a look. And I started flipping through the statements and I realized that they had 18 separate accounts at 7 different banks. So of course, nobody knew how much they could spend because nobody had the big picture. So primarily what I did for them was simply consolidate all that stuff into 4 accounts, 2 individual accounts, 2 IRA accounts, and then every month give them their allowance. And that's how they were taken care of. All right, I've talked an awful lot. I could probably go on for another half hour, but that would not be fair. So let me take exactly 3 questions, and then we'll do the drawing, and I'll be around for another half hour at least. Anybody else wants to follow up individually. So I'll start back here.
When you say you can spend 4 to 6%, I guess of your stock income, that's just interest income, or is that principal? You get down the plate.
Right. The question was, what does that 4 to 6% represent? Is it just interest income, or is it principal, or what is it? In the old days, investment portfolios were designed to be income only. Okay, so you had a lot of bond-heavy portfolios that were spending the coupons as the time went by. But that left out a lot of opportunities in things like stocks that don't pay dividends, but yet have growth potential. So when I say 4 to 6%, I mean 4 to 6% of the total value of the assets. So let's say if you have $1 million and $600,000 of it is stocks and $400,000 of it is bonds, we're going to take out 4% a year, which is to say 1/3% per month, and deposit that into your checking account.
How much is that?
Well, it would be $60,000 a year, so $5,000 a month. The year that I can't do math in my head will be a very sad year for me. But here's something else that's actually kind of useful. All right, so we just went through the worst financial crisis that any of us could ever imagine in the rest of our lives in the last 2 years. 1/3 of my clients are drawing on their portfolios to pay for their retirement. So 1/3 of them are getting that monthly allowance. And I did not have to cut anybody's allowance through that entire crisis because we were drawing the money out of relatively stable bond funds, and I said, relax, when the stock market recovers, we will reload the bond funds from the stocks. And that's exactly what we're doing right now.
Okay.
Question in this other room?
Who do you use as a custodian?
Okay, very good question. Who do we use as a custodian? Is everybody familiar with Bernie Madoff? Anybody not familiar with Bernie Madoff?
Sign us up.
When I started my firm up 19 years ago, the very first thing I did was choose a custodian. A custodian is a separate administrator who holds the client's assets and sends a separate statement to the client every month. My statement must match the custodian's statement. Furthermore, I do not have access to the client's funds. I cannot take their money out via check or move assets or whatever. I can't commingle it in my own accounts. I can't do anything like that. I can deduct the advisory fee, that's it. Okay? This falls into the category of what I call trust but verify. And what killed the Madoff investors was they simply wrote checks to his firm. The funds were commingled into a giant thing. They got a dummy statement every month, right? They should have guessed after a while it was a little bogus because we were getting dot matrix statements in the current era, right? Well, what's up with that? But they got 12% a year, and that was pretty good. They never questioned it until all the money was gone. So the custodian that we chose was Fidelity Investments in Boston. The big 3 or the big 4 custodians are Fidelity, Schwab, TD Waterhouse, Ameritrade. Putnam is actually more of a mutual fund company. I think they have a brokerage operation, but when you work with Fidelity, you have essentially a $2.2 trillion asset company backing up someone like me. So there's about 5,500 investment advisors that use Fidelity as their custodian, rely on Fidelity for running checks, credit cards, trust services, any number of services, but Fidelity relies on people like me to really be the primary interface with the client and solve the client's specific needs. One last question, and we'll do the raffle. One last question? Here, I will ask one last question.
Okay.
Dave, when is the next time the stock market's going to crash?
That's good.
Anybody have that question?
Oh, yeah, I did.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
All right.
Oh, come on.
What seems to drive stock market crashes are two things: overuse of leverage and underuse of risk management. And we've seen that in 2008, obviously. We saw that in 1998 with long-term capital management almost blew up the economy. That was a blip for most people, but I sweated a lot that summer. We saw it in 1987 with the portfolio insurance market meltdown. Stock market fell 22% in a day. All right? Other crises running back in the 70s, in the 20s and 30s, it was really the Wild West. And so right now, the system is dramatically deleveraged. The banks are dramatically deleveraging. They won't lend you any money anymore. A lot of my small business clients, lost their lines of credit. Mr. and Mrs. America are closing down their mortgages, cutting up their credit cards, running their car into the ground, right? You look at the statistics. This is the first time ever consumer debt has declined, ever, in the last couple of years, all right? And the bankers are very much on top of the banks right now, very strong regulation, in their face, everyone's on their best behavior. Blah, blah, blah. I would say that by 2018, all of the lessons of this crisis will be forgotten, and so around 2017, I'll start sweating again. But at least for the time being, the stock market seems to be reasonably, fairly valued, the risk seems to be drained out of it, and I've got my clients fully invested. Thank you, that's it for questions. Let's go back to Stacey for the...
Thank you, David. Very good, very informative. I appreciate it. Thank you.